Good evening. It's the late show edition of the Kahal Yereim Daf Yomi. We are sponsored by Josh and Chana Bernstein in absentia. B'schus a refuah shlema for our dear friend Yanki Flussberg. She continue to have refuah shlema. Yaakov Moshe ben Freidel Ita, and in honor of their son, meaning Josh and Chana's son, not Yanki's son. Penny's Hanachas Tefillin that was already, and the up Sharon Baruch Hashem went very well. Have nice pictures. It was very nice. Very, very beautiful. So Mazel Tov to the Bernsteins. A busy week. And we're at the Mishnah. The Kula, we're putting things on the Mizbeach still. The Kula Shepoko Me'al Gabe Mizbeach Lo Yachzir. Anything that falls off the Mizbeach after it was already placed in the fire. So now you don't put it back in. You don't go back. V'chein Gacheles, also coals. Shepoko Me'al Gabe Mizbeach that pop off the fire, go out of the Mizbeach, lo yachzir, they don't go back on. Eivarim shepakum me'al Mizbeach kodem chatzos, the limbs that fall out of the Mizbeach before midnight. Before midnight. What does midnight have to do with anything? We don't know yet. The Gemara is going to have to figure that out. Why does that make a difference? If they're burnt, okay, so they're burnt already, so then don't put them back on. If they're not burnt, put them back on. You got to finish up. They got to go back in the fire. Why should it matter what time it is? So it says, if they come out before chatzos, yachzir, then put it back in the mizbeach. They're not done yet. Umoalin behen, and you can still commit me'ilah on them because they are still belonging to the fire of the mizbeach. You can't use something that belongs to the fire mizbeach. Liachar chatzos, after chatzos is done, lo yachzir, then you don't put it back. Vein moalin behen, since you don't need to put it back, there's no me'ilah problems because it's already finished with its avoda. It's done.
It's the first Mishnah in Brachos, right? Isn't that what it is? You have
well, that's where, you have to chatzos to say Shema. So there seems to...
hektar chalavim ve'varim.
Yeah.
Isn't that what this is?
That is what this is, right? So there's some time connection between hektar chalavim and the evarim chalavim and chatzos. You are correct. Having read ahead a little bit,
Because I have to. We
make
signed
the
up for learning Mishnah with my kids.
So there you go.
It's a new. They give us a. If you learn Mishnah, then you get a sweatshirt.
And that's totally good. Kishem sham mizbeach mekadesh es haroi lo. Just like the Mizbeach makes holy that which is appropriate for it, kach hakeves mekadesh, so too the ramp also does. Kishem sham mizbeach ve'hakeves mekadshin es haroi lahen, kach hakilim mekan. Just like the Mizbeach and the ramp are mekadesh, those things that go on the Mizbeach, so too the utensils of the Beis HaMikdash also make things holy. That those things that are appropriate for those utensils, as we will see. Says the Gemara, Heichi dami. What is the circumstance? What are we talking about in the Mishnah? Id isbehu mamish. Okay, we had learned that anything that falls out of the fire, you don't need to put back. So if it literally has still some of the flesh there that needs to get burnt, safili achar chatzos nami. So then why not put it back on the fire after chatzos? Id isbehu mamish. If it doesn't have much left, afilu kodem chatzos nami lo. Then even before chatzos, you also don't have to. So the answer is lo tzricha b'shriri. We're talking about they are crispy, right? Rashi says b'shriri, cushion. They're hard already, right? So they're already kind of burnt up already. They're not completely ash, but they're not unburnt either. So therefore, chatzos is going to determine, right? Whether you've completed the service or whether you have not completed the service. So if it before chatzos, right, it's still time to burn, so therefore continue it burning. And if it's after chatzos, it's already, as you said, you start to see that's already the time after the time to burn, so no need to put it back on already. It's already been burned. Minani mili, what is the source for this? So Amar Rav says, Kosav echad omer kol halayla vehiktir. The pasuk says that this is in Vayikra, Perek Vav, pasuk Beis. Right, you're supposed to put the fats on the fire all night, and it will burn right until the morning. That's what it says. So therefore, we should learn from there that you're supposed to put the limbs on all night. Then we have another pasuk. Next pasuk, the kosav echad. Omer, the other pasuk says kol halayla veheirim. right? You're going to burn these limbs all night, and then it says you're supposed to then scoop off the ashes that were burned from the fire. So there, we know that you can take the Trumas Hadeshen all night. So that means the time for burning is before you take the ashes off. So therefore, it seems like the time for burning has ended already. So which is it? Is you're supposed to burn it all night, or is it already ashes and you can take Trumas Hadeshen all night? So we're going to split the night in half. Chetzio lahaktara v'chetzio laharama. Half the night is for burning, half the night is for scooping out ash. That's how they get chatzos. That's midnight, right in the middle. Meisiv Rav Kahana says, 1 second. B'chol yom tormis mezbeach mikros hagever o samucho. Every day, the regular procedure was that the Kohen would proceed up the ramp and he would scoop out some ash as the Trumas Hadeshen service in the morning. First thing, that was done around the time that the rooster would crow, or a little bit before, a little bit after. Right? Samach lo milafanav o me'acharav doesn't have to be exactly at that time. You don't have to have a rooster handy, right? Check your pocket rooster and check. You can presume around, give or take. B'yom Kippurim, but when comes Yom Kippur, bechatzos. Yom Kippur, they would push it back to chatzos. And beragolim, and when it comes to the Yomim Tovim, so then Bashmoras Harishona, they would put it back to the first watch. There again, we got the reference to the first Mishnah in Brachos. Yeah. Three watches overnight. So the end of the first watch is only a third of the night, right? That's only 4 hours into the night, not even 6 hours into the night. That's even an earlier time. Now, if you're going to tell me that the time when you're supposed to scoop the ashes out begins from the psukim that you said, so therefore it's a Torah rule, and therefore it's only available from midnight, Hechi mikadminon, how are you supposed to push it back on the Yom Tovim? Now, why do we push it back? I do not remember whether they say it first here or whether it's Rashi who says it. So I'll mention if the Gemara says it in a moment, then you'll forgive me, because I can't remember whether Rashi says it was the Gemara. But the reason why in Yom Kippur is the Kohen has to do all the service all by himself, right? So therefore, this gives him an opportunity at midnight to scoop out the ashes and then go take a break before he has to get ready for all the morning services and start doing all the korbanos in the morning.
Kohen Gadol has to do it all?
Yes, so therefore that's what we learn from here, that the Kohen Gadol, he's doing not only everything, but he's even doing Trumas Hadeshen, right? Even he's supposed to do that. So he has a very busy day. So therefore we back him up. We give him a little bit of space. Midnight, go out, do the Trumas Hadeshen, come back to your room and relax a little bit. You don't have to, right? So then on the Regolim, there were so many people, the Beis HaMikdash was getting so crowded, everybody showed up. So therefore, it would get so crowded, you didn't even wait till midnight, because people were already showing up and lining up and entering the Beis HaMikdash in the middle of the night. Therefore, they did the Trumas Hadeshen before people arrived, even earlier. So therefore, that's the reason why we backed him up. So now the question is, how are we supposed to back it up? You're not allowed to back it up before Chatzos. Rabbi Yochanan says, Mimash Moshenemar Kol HaLayla, Eini Yodea She'ad HaBoker. What if the pasuk says that you're supposed to be able to do something all night long? So then, why does the pasuk then have to say until morning? Obviously, all night long is until the morning. Matam lomar ad boker. So why is it? What does it mean when the pasuk says until the morning? Right? Why? Why does it say that you should burn the limbs on the mizbeach all night until the morning? So the answer is Tein boker lebrokro shel laila. The pasuk is telling us there's a morning which is before the morning which is in the night. Meaning, the psukim tell me I've got chatzos. Then this pasuk then says ad boker to tell me there's an earlier time also. There's a morning to the morning. Besides chatzos being the official time, there's an earlier time to back it up to even further. Therefore, we can even back it up to the next available further time, which is the third. Hilkach, therefore, kol yoma mikros hagever sagi. It is the Gemara. Therefore, every day when I've got plenty of time, so then I can do it when the rooster crows, right before sunrise, but when the rooster crows. B'Yom Kippurim, but then on comes Yom Kippur, Mishum Chulsha the Kohen Gadol, since the Kohen Gadol is weak, we're going to give him some space. So Mechatzos, you're going to go back to Chatzos. And Beragolim, And when it comes to the Yom Tovim, de nefishe korbanos, everybody's showing up, everybody's got their korbanos. De kodmi also Yisrael me'ashmoras rishona. Everybody's showing up early to the base of Mikdash. Apparently, people were lining up at midnight in order to be able to get in line to be able to bring their korbanos, so that we backed up to the first watch. Kedekatani Seifa. Right, like the end says, Lo haisa kriyas hagever magas achahaisa azara malaya mi Yisrael. Right, by the time the rooster would crow, the entire courtyard area was completely packed with people. So therefore, they didn't wait. They didn't wait till people were already showing up. They backed it up. So therefore, that's how you read these psukim. You've got chatzos, right? Ideally, you do it in the morning. You've got chatzos. That's a plenty good time to do it. And in a pinch, you've got a morning before that to go to as well. And that's how the psukim read. Itmar, here's our question now. Pirshu kodem chatzos. Let's say the stuff popped off before midnight, which means that you're supposed to put it back on. Vehechziron achar chatzos. Then you put it back on after chatzos, right? I guess you walk by the base of Mikdash at 12:03 and you realize, hey, there's something here on the floor. Let's put it back on, okay? Rabba says, chatzos sheni uchlosan. At what point are we now going to consider it to be consumed by the fire? We had chatzos as the consumption point before, right? After anything that's hard already by chatzos is considered to be burned. This wasn't on the fire during chatzos. So it's going to get put back onto the fire. But now, at what point is it considered to be consumed so that if it pops off, it doesn't have to be put back on again? Says Rabbi, tomorrow. Got to wait till next chatzos. So you've got all the way till tomorrow. Rav Chisda says, Amud HaShachar uchlasan. No, so the Amud HaShachar, when the first rays of the sun come over the horizon, that's going to be the end of that. Amri Bei Rav. So they said in the Yeshiva of Rav, my time of the Rav Chisda. So what is Rav Chisda's logic? I mean, I understand Rabbi, I guess a little bit. Chatzos is what the pasuk says, right? So therefore, you have to wait around till you get to the next chatzos. But what's Rav Chisda's logic? Uma chatzos shein osa lina osa ikol. Look, when it comes to chatzos, that's a time that doesn't establish that things that were left over until the morning are invalidated. You've got until Amud HaShachar for that to be a violation, for things that that should have been consumed at night to be left over into the morning. So Amud HaShachar, but nevertheless, Chatzos makes something consumed on the Mizbeach. Amud HaShachar, the sunrise, or not the sunrise, but the light first rays of sun, She'osa lina, that does invalidate, and that makes anything that was left over from the previous day invalid. For sure, that should be powerful enough a time to be able to consider everything that's on the Mizbeach consumed. Okay, so that's their thing. Now, Pershu Kodim Chatzos, something falls off the fire before Chatzos. Vehechziron li achar Amud HaShachar. Now, they don't notice it until Amud HaShachar. Now, what happens there? Rav Chisda can't say Amud HaShachar is going to help you. What do you do now? Rabba Amar Chatzos Sheni. Rabba is going to say, fine, you wait till next midnight, which is fine anyway, because he said to do that anyway before. Right? Chatzos Sheni uchlasan. Rav Chisda says, Ein bahen equally olam. There's no such thing. They're never going to be. Therefore, it's always got to be returned to the fire until it's ash. You're never going to be finished with, never going to be in a state where it's hard, but it's consumed and it's good enough, and you don't have to keep putting it back on. Right? You've ran out of times. You had your chatzos, you had your olas hashachar, and now it's too amud hashachar. Now it's too late. Maskif Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef asks the question: Uman leimalon de chatzos berosh hamizbeach mishavi lahu ikol. Who is the why? Why is it that chatzos, right after these limbs are on the mizbeach, right? Then chatzos is going to turn it into it being consumed. Dilma kol hechat mishkacha lahu mishavi lahu ikol. Maybe chatzos is the time. I mean, we sort of like breezed by that, right? It has to be in the fire at chatzos for it to be. No, not necessarily. If it was hard before chatzos, and now it was off the fire during chatzos, but now it's after chatzos, it's still hard. It doesn't have to get put back on. Why does it have to get put back on? So sholchu mitam. So they sent from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel hilchos Rav Yosef. Baruch was actually like Rav Yosef. He's correct. That is a good observation, and therefore it doesn't matter where it is. Doesn't have to get put back on. It marnami, it was also stated, Amar Rabbi bar Abba said, Pirshu kodim chatzos. Let's say something falls off, comes out before chatzos. Ve'echziran achar chatzos. So, and then he puts it back on after chatzos. Lo nehenin velo mo'alin. So there's the midivrei chachamim, right? It's not me'ila anymore because once it passed chatzos, it's already done. But midirabanan, we said we don't want anybody getting any benefit from these things because it's close. It looks kind of like korban pieces. Chachamim made an extra rule to stay away from it. So therefore, that also supports what Rav Yosef says. V'chein tana bar kapara. So that is what was taught by bar kapara. Pirshu kodem chatzos, if the meat gets separate, or the meat or the limbs, whatever it is, that gets separated off the fire, kodem chatzos before chatzos, vechziron liachar chatzos, and then you put them back on after chatzos, yotzin midei meila. So then these they're no longer in the confines of the prohibition of meila anymore, right? They're done. You don't have to worry about meila anymore. Okay. Amarle Rav Papa l'Abaye. Rav Papa says to Abaye, "V'chimi acher deshachu mitam hilchos Rav Yosef." Now that we said Eretz Yisrael came and they said the halachos of Rav Yosef. V'amar Rav Chia bar Abba, and Rav Chia bar Abba said it too. V'chein tani bar kapara, and also we taught bar kapara taught it. Rabbi Rav Chisda, but my pliki. So he says, then what is Rabba and Rav Chisda? What is their arguing? How are they arguing, right? It doesn't make sense that they're arguing with all these people who said the halacha is like Rav Yosef, that says that those things that come off the mizbeach, right, that before chatzos, then they're not considered to be consumed. Obviously, Rabba and Rav Chisda would have thought the halacha is like Rav Yosef as well. So it doesn't make sense to say that really, is that what they're arguing about? What time? So what is it that they're really arguing about? Amarle bishminim. They're arguing if the item comes off the mizbeach and it still has real fat on it, meaning it's not a hardened piece, then they would agree with Rav Yosef. A hardened piece doesn't have to be in the fire for it to be consumed. But if this piece still has fat on it, so therefore it's not considered, the midnight's not going to help you, it still needs to be burned. So therefore that's where they said, put it back on the fire, and at what point then can you have a recheck to determine whether it's consumed or not. That's what they were arguing. But meaning Rava me Rabba. So Rava asked Rabba the following question: Lina mo elas beroshel shel mizbeach, or ena mo elas beroshel shel mizbeach. If you have items that are supposed to be taken care of over that day and night, the night of a korban, let's say you've got the avarim that are supposed to be burned that night. If something is on top of the mizbeach, does it turn into does it become puzzle because of lina or not? So heichi dami. So what is the circumstance that Rava was asking about? Ilema de lo yardu. If we're talking about that these items are limbs, right, that are found on the Rosh Mizbeach, that so then they don't that these are the limbs that are not supposed to come down. So then hashta be'azara amart de lo yerdu berosh Rosh Mizbeach midbai. So he says, well, we would say that even if these limbs were on the ground in the azara and they became leftover belina by staying in the azara in the morning, so then they go up on the mizbeach, right? That was, we said, if something had lina, you're not supposed to bring it up on the mizbeach. But im alu lo yerdu, because the psul was bakodesh, so therefore it goes up, it doesn't come down. So what's your question? If this is an item that if it would go up, it would not come down. So of course, once it's on the mizbeach, it doesn't come down, right? For sure, it's going to get burnt up there. So ve'ela de yardu. What must be going on here is the items came down from the mizbeach, meaning that the items were on the top of the mizbeach. Obviously, it's not supposed to come down. But the suffix of Rava was where the limbs were on the mizbeach at alos hashachar, and then afterwards somebody took them down. Okay, so the question is it lina? Because if it's not lina, then there's absolutely no problem bringing them right back up the mizbeach, and you're in good shape. Right? But if there is lina, so once they come down, they don't get brought back up. So that was his question. Do they have a psul of lino while they're on top of the mizbeach? So the reason why he asked this question is, l'shulchan midaminon lo, do we consider the mizbeach to have the same powers as the shulchan? It's not, because we learned about the shulchan. Afilu hein al hashulchan yomim rabim aim bekach klum. That the lechem aponim and the spoons with the incense, they were changed every week, right? You put every week the new mishmar of the Kohanim would come in, and they would slide one loaf of bread off and put the other one in its place. And but the one that's sitting on the shulchan stays overnight. One day, and the next day, 7 days, it stays overnight. And we learned that when it comes to the shulchan, it can stay on there, and it's not lina, which is shocking, because every other korban expires after a day. Right, you can't just leave. So therefore, that's the question: is the mizbeach like the shulchan? Anything that's sitting on top of it gets to stay on it. O dilma lekarka b'daminon, or do we consider the mizbeach like the ground? And we know that if these limbs were on the ground when alos shachar hit, then they're puzzle. They're puzzle belina. They shouldn't go up. So Amar lei, ein lina barosh mizbeach. There is no lina on the top of the mizbeach. It's not.
That's what I would have thought. It doesn't really. Right?
You think it's because it's like the shulchan?
No, I thought, of course. Why would it be lina? You already put it up there.
Right? But it's not burnt.
It's not burnt because it just didn't get to there. It didn't burn it yet.
Okay, so this makes sense to you. Okay, good. Now the question is, kibla mineo lo. Now that we've got this answer, did he like the answer or not? Right. This is did Rabbi told Rava the answer. Did Rava like it? Right. So Tashma. So let's come and listen to Itmar. We have another statement from the base medrash that says, Evorim shelonu ba'azara. If you have limbs that stayed overnight in the courtyard of the base of Mikdash, mekater v'holech kol halayla. So then they could be burnt and go all night. Right. So therefore, as long as meaning they were overnight, and it's still nighttime, you could still bring them up. They're in the Azara at night. You could bring them up. Right. Once it's also shachar, then they become lidas. There's no problem bringing them at any point during the night. Lanu berosh shel mizbeach. If they spent overnight on the top of the mizbeach, mekater v'holech liolam, then they can always be burnt. So yardu, if they come down, then Rabba Amar Yalu, Rabba says, bring them back up, because there's no lina once it's on top of his back. It's not lina, bring them back up, they're not puzzle. Rava Amar Lo Yalu, Rava says no, don't, which sounds like Rava did not accept Rabba's answer, right? So even though he told me, no. Okay, Shma mina de lo kibla minei, Shma mina. So you can see from there that he didn't accept it. That was didn't accept it. Fine. They stayed in a machlokas. So, Keshem Shem Mizbeach Mekadesh, then the Mishnah says that just like the Mizbeach is able to elevate something to a status of holiness that you shouldn't take it off, so too the ramp does as well. Once meaning you don't have to get all the way up to the top of the Mizbeach, you just got to get up the ramp. So, Tanar Rabbanan, rabbis learned, Hanogea Mizbeach. So the pasuk says, anything that touches the Mizbeach Yikdosh becomes consecrated. So, Ainli Ela Mizbeach. The pasuk seems to say just the mizbeach. Keves minayin. Kevesh minayin? How do I know to include the ramp? Talmud Lomar. The pasuk says es hamizbeach. It's going to be that you're going to anoint mashach the es hamizbeach. The es is a riboy. This is according to the Shita that holds that the word es. Anytime you have the word es, it comes to include something else. Not just mizbeach is mekadesh. Something else is mekadesh. The ramp is mekadesh as well. Kli sharis minayin. So now, where do I know that the utensils? We said the Mishnah also said the utensils can consecrate. Talmud Lomar. Therefore, it says kol hanogea bahem yikdash. Anything that touches will also be able to consecrate. Right? Is that where's that pasuk? That's in the same place. Lam perik lam pasuk chavtes. Right, when they were anointing the utensils, they said that they anointed the klisharis kol hanogea. Anything that touches these utensils will become consecrated as well. So therefore, we have the mizbeach, we have the ramp, and we've got the utensils. Okay. Amar lei. So sorry, skipped. Boimine reish lakish Rabbi Yochanan. So Reish Lakish asks Rabbi Yochanan the following question: Kli shores mahu sheyikadshu es hapsulin. When we talk about the utensils being mekadesh something, the general understanding of that is that when somebody has oil and they pour it into the utensil that they're going to mix the korban together, all of the oil and the flour together, once the oil goes into the utensil, then the oil becomes kodesh, right? Which means we're talking about perfectly valid oil, flour, those kinds of things become consecrated when they get put into the utensil. But what about puzzle things, right? We know the Mizbeach is able to consecrate things that are puzzle, right? Is that unique to the Mizbeach? Or can the utensils, let's say I've got puzzle flour somehow, right? I'm going to have a yayin nesach, right? For example, or something that was avoda, right? Not all puzzle things, only those things are puzzle bakodesh.
Right, like not Rovea, Nirva,
correct.
Or Esnan.
Those are outside, right?
Yeah.
Even muktzah neva, that's why my yayin nesach example wasn't a great one, right? I had to be able to have something that was something tamei, right? If the one was tamei, something like that. So Amar Le, so he says tani suha, right? We already learned this in our Mishnah. Kishem shemizbeach v'kevesh mikadshin, just like the mizbeach and the ramp are able to make things holy, es haroi lahen, just like those things that are appropriate for them, kach kelim mikadshin, so too the utensils are as well. So therefore, right, a puzzle thing too, right? So and that means when it's mekadesh, it means it becomes so holy that you can't redeem it. That's the critical thing. If I've got something like wine or flour that has become unusable, it's just money, right? So I can just exchange it. We don't need to wait for it. It's not like an animal that you have to wait till it gets a mum in order to buy it out, right? So therefore, if I've got flour that becomes unusable for some reason, all I got to do is exchange it for other flour. It's not the biggest deal in the world. But once it gets into the container, now it has kedusha saguf. It has this elevated level of kedusha. Now you cannot redeem it. So, okay. So Amar Le, so Reish Lakish says to Rabbi Yochanan, okay, I wasn't asking about redeeming. That wasn't my point. The question I was asking is, do you bring it up as a korban? Now that it's in the utensil, and the puzzle item, I get it. Once it's puzzle item, it goes into the utensil, it's consecrated. Great, okay, fine. And you can't redeem it, okay, fine. But the question is now, do I bring it on the Mizbeach? Do I burn it? What do I do? Like, can I bring it? That's what I'm asking.
Is that how you're understanding of Yochanan's answer? I understood it to mean, no, you can, they're not Kodesh.
1 second. Boimine Reb Shlakish mer Rabbi Yochanan. Reb Shlakish says Rabbi Yochanan. Kol klisharis mahu sheyakadshu es hapsulin. Can it work? Amar Le tanisua. We learned that it can. Kishem mizbeach v'keves mekadshim es aroylan kach kelim mekadshim. Right, the kelim are able to be mekadesh it.
I thought it means that just like the mizbeach only is mekadesh something that is roy to be kodesh as roy, and therefore something that is puzzle is not kodesh.
Well, we're gonna let's see why I don't say that. Rashi says, and that's why I just read it and left it, right? Rashi says, Amalei Tanisua, we learned it in our Mishnah, de mekadshin ve'ein lahen pidyon. They are kodesh, and you cannot redeem them from these puzzle items. That's how Rashi understands it. Okay. Because why would I say that? Because that's exactly how the Mizbeach works, right? It's roi, but what does roi mean? Roi doesn't only, the Mizbeach is only not only Mekadesh roi things that are koda, that are kosher, the Mizbeach is actually Mekadesh things that are roi that are puzzle as well. So therefore, just like the Mizbeach can be Mekadesh things that are appropriate for it, that are puzzle to a degree, so too the Klishares can as well. So, okay, so Amar Le, lechatchila likarev kamiboili. My real question was, can you bring it as a korban? So Hanami Tanina. That we also already learned in our Mishnah on Pei Daled. Shekiblu psulin v'zarku es damo. Let's say the Kohen puzzle catches the blood, or they sprinkle the blood. So then, in those circumstances, we said that they go up, they don't come down. So, my love, shekiblu psulim v'zarku psulim. Are we not talking about what happened? A person who was a non-kosher Kohen, not a kosher Kohen, caught the blood, And then what does he do? He then sprinkles the blood. What's he doing sprinkling the blood? It's puzzle. The answer is, despite the fact that it's puzzle, you go ahead and you offer it as a korban anyway. You keep going, right? So, and, right, why? Because the dam is collected in a utensil, in a kli. So since the kli is mekadesh it so much that you can go and bring it lechatchila and sprinkle it. So he says that's not what the Mishnah means.
That's not lechatchila. The Mishnah's not talking about lechatchila anyway.
Well, it is, because shekiblu psulin means they caught it. And then what happened? If it wasn't lechatchila, they wouldn't go and zarku psulin, then that wouldn't have happened.
Okay.
That second step has to be lechatchila. That's their point, right? Okay. You're right. The first thing that happened to it is not lechatchila. We didn't want it to become puzzle. Right. But now that it is, the psulim are going to continue on and they're going to throw it. So the answer is lo. That's not what's going on. Shep kiblu psulin inami shazarku psulin. It's two separate cases. The case was either somebody who was a non-kosher Kohen caught the blood, or somebody who was a non-kosher Kohen threw the blood. Either of those things invalidate the offering. Prior to that, it was 100% fine. That's why we were still doing the offering. It's not because of the utensil that we kept going despite the fact that it's puzzle. It's because it was still a fine, perfectly good offering. So
you can't really do it lechatchila.
And so you therefore, or at least our Mishnah doesn't prove one way or the other, right? So we're going to leave that as unclear, right? Unclear, which we're going to get used to because we're going to have a few of these that are going to be unclear. Okay, so we'll leave them as unclear. But sometimes when you get to the end of the parak, right, the last few things, it's like, here's a few other things to throw in there, and you're not going to like them. We're not going to have good answers. Okay.
Sounds familiar.
That's right. Get used to it. That's Gemara. Avir mizbeach kemizbeach dami olo. The airspace over the mizbeach. Is the airspace over the mizbeach like it being on the mizbeach or not? So toshma. And they didn't have helicopters or things like that at that time, so that's what we're going to try to figure out what's going on here. So toshma, come and listen. Kishim mizbeach mekadesh kach kevesh mekadesh. Just like the mizbeach is able to make something consecrated, so too the ramp is able to make it consecrated. Via mart aver mizbeach lav kemizbeach dami. If you're going to tell me the airspace is not, so aver kevesh nami lav kekevesh dami, then that means that the ramp's airspace is not also like the ramp, right? Same thing, if they're both the same. Therefore, hechi masik le mi kevesh lemizbeach. So how are you getting this meat, these limbs from the ramp up to the mizbeach? You got to pick it up. As soon as you pick it up, it's not on the ramp anymore. Now it's in the airspace. Since it's in the airspace, now it's off the mizbeach. What's the halacha? Im yardu lo'al, it doesn't go back up. If you took it off the mizbeach, it doesn't go back up. So as soon as you pick it up, in order to bring it up the ramp, in order to burn it, like you're supposed to, now it's off the mizbeach, and then you couldn't continue.
When you're standing somewhere and holding something,
Yeah.
that thing is considered to be in the airspace and not on that thing.
Yeah, that's Gemara is going to bring that point up. So hang on to that. Good point. Yeah, good point. So you're ahead of us. Okay.
Maybe that's my first time.
So Havale Yarud, that lifting, when you lift it up, you bring it. If you're right that the airspace is not, they're trying to prove here that the airspace is still the mizbeach, because after all, once you pick it up, you're in the airspace. So the answer is denugid lay. No, he could be dragging it, right? It's a big piece of meat. Just drag it along the ground. V'ha avir yesh bein kevesh l'mizbeach. You're still going to get stuck somewhere. Remember, we learned that there was a little bit of space between the ramp and the mizbeach. So you got to get over that airspace somehow. So you can't drag it into the crevice and back up again. You're going to drag it over that airspace. So the answer is ruvo lekevesh kekevesh, ruvo mizbeach. The answer is it's a big piece of meat. The space, it's a small space. So therefore, if you're dragging it, most of it is on the ramp, then some of it is in the air. Then you drag it a little further, most of it is on the mizbeach, and some of it is in the air. You never have a circumstance where it's all in the air, most of it's on the mizbeach, or most of it's on the ramp. So that's not going to be an issue. Tifshot meha. So let's answer from here. Hadaboy Rami Barchama. So this is so we can, based on that answer, let's now resolve a question that Rami Barchama had. Rami Barchama asked the question, Yesh chibur le'olin olo. So he says, is the ola are all the parts, if you've got a piece of an animal that's being burnt on the Mizbeach, is it all considered one piece and all attached to itself or not? Meaning, if I've got part of the Ola and it's hanging off the side of the Mizbeach, is that part that hangs over the side of the Mizbeach now considered off the Mizbeach and you shouldn't bring it back on? Or do you say, well, the majority of the piece is on the Mizbeach, so therefore it stays on? That was his question, and he wasn't sure of the answer. Now you can answer, right? Tifshot digesh chibur. Based on this, since there's no way for you to have a limb get from the ramp to the Mizbeach without it going through this airspace, it must be that it's all attached, all one piece. That resolves that problem. So holo kasha, that's not a problem because tifsho. Maybe that answers his question, right? That's perfectly reasonable that we found the answer to his question. So, okay. Maskifla Rava bar Rav Chanan. So Rava bar Rav Chanan asked the question. Yamart avir mizbeach ki mizbeach dami. Okay, if you're going to hold that the airspace of the mizbeach is like the mizbeach, olas ha'of, right? So we left that one, by the way, right? So it was olas. So, but we're still in this airspace business. So, but we're going to try to attack it from a different angle. Okay, if you have an olas ha'of de pasla b'machshava hechi mishkachasla, you've got an olas oaf. Remember how the olas ha'of was done? We stood on the corner of the mizbeach on the ledge, and if somebody has machshavas pigul, right? So then the rest of the thought, the rest of the action of the bird has to be done properly in order for you to be in violation of pigul. So how are you going to wind up having a pigul circumstance by this bird? Ha kulta mizbeach. Because if the airspace is the Mizbeach, then the bird at all times was in the airspace of the Mizbeach. You were on the Mizbeach when you did the Malika. Therefore, don't take the bird off the Mizbeach. It stays up there, and therefore there's no such thing as it being puzzle and not being burned. Of course, you're going to burn every time. Any psul you have of a bird ola is going to get burnt on the Mizbeach anyway. You have no such thing as a psul that doesn't get burnt by an ola because it was being offered while you're standing on the Mizbeach.
Okay. That's fine. Why is that a big...
So maskif la Rav Shimi bar Ashi. Because we had learned where we have that. Oh, well, I see what the point is. The point is that since you're going to be able to burn it tomorrow anyway, if you think that you're going to burn it tomorrow, that makes it pigul, right? Why? Because it can't be burnt tomorrow. But the thing is, it can be. Because once it's on the Mizbeach, it's going to be burnt. Therefore, the thought pigul doesn't exist. Right?
Because it's already on the Mizbeach.
Because since it's on, in order for it to be pigul, you have to have in mind to do something that you can't really do. Yeah. I'm going to burn this bird at a time beyond when I'm allowed to do it. Except that since it's already on the Mizbeach, there's never a time that you can't burn this bird. As long as it's up on the Mizbeach, you can burn it. Therefore, since there's never a time you can't burn the bird, you can't have in mind, even if I have in mind I'm going to burn it tomorrow, you're right, you can.
And there's other psuls that you could make in this.
That's true, but at least we know there's such a concept of pigul by an olas ha'of. This would seem to indicate that there's no such thing as pigul by olas ha'of. So he says, well, Ma'askef Rav Shimi bar Ashi, alama lo mishkachas lo kegon to amar hareini molka al minas lahorida lemachar ulahaloso lahaktira. Why don't we just say that what he decided was, my pigul intent has to be like this. I am going to do this malika with the intent that I'm going to take it down to the floor, and then tomorrow I'm going to bring it back up. That you can't do, because once it goes off in this bech, you can't bring it up. Now that I've come up with a circumstance where I can't do that, I have pigul. I can understand there's a circumstance of pigul. Okay, hanicha l'Rava, that's good according to Rava. Damar linamo elas berosh hamizbeach, right? He says, I'm going to bring it up to the mizbeach, then tomorrow I'm going to take it down, and then I'll bring it back up. Okay, but according to Rava, who says that when it stayed overnight, then it became it now comes into the category of lina, which means that if I take it off the mizbeach, I can't bring it back on. El Rabba, but according to Rabba, who said Damar ain lina mo elas barosh mizbeach, that while it's on the mizbeach, there's no meila. I mean, no lina, which means that even though I said I'm going to bring it up, I'm going to leave it on the mizbeach till tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to bring it down. You still can bring it back up, so that's not a problem. So leisa l'machshava so then there's no problem with his thoughts. So l'Rabba nami mishkachas. Well, no, I'll tell you what Rabba's version is. Kigon da'amar reini molka amanas lahorida kodem amud shachar. He says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do malika, and before the first rays of light come out, so Melina, it's not on the mizbeach. I'm going to take it down. And it's not going to be on the mizbeach. If it was on the mizbeach, it would be protected from Lina. But it's not going to be on the mizbeach. It's going to be on the ground at that time. Then after Amud Shachar, then I'm going to bring it up. So he's got to be really precise in his pigul, right? This guy's got to really want to do pigul here in order to figure out all of this stuff, right? Okay. Now, lahach gisa miha tifshot. Okay, fine. Fair question. Fair point. Okay. At least on this side, we can resolve, and that goes like this: the over mizbeach mizbeach dami, right? The airspace of the mizbeach, fine, we can't resolve that issue. But as far as the airspace of the mizbeach is concerned, it's for sure like the mizbeach. Why? De'isal kadaitach of your mizbeach lav k'mizbeach dami. If you're going to hold that the airspace of the mizbeach is not like the mizbeach, so then chatas ha'of pesula hechi moze midama. So the chatos ha'of, that is puzzle, right? Let's say the malika was not lishma, for example, right? You remember that we had by chatos it has to be done lishma, it has to be for the sake of a chatos. So now you do it there. So now we have a rule that anything that's puzzle that goes on the mizbeach doesn't come down. So you should be allowed. If you did this malika on the top of the mizbeach, even though you're not supposed to do it up there, right? Normally, right, we're supposed to be doing it below, by the chuta sikra before. Okay, so let's say you could do it, but you're allowed to do it anywhere. If somebody does malika on this chatas on the mizbeach, hechi maze midama. How is he going to be allowed to sprinkle the blood on the mizbeach? Because as soon as he lifts the bird up, in order to apply the blood, hava le yorud. The airspace, if you're telling me that airspace is not connected to the mizbeach, then as soon as he lifts up this bird in order to apply the blood, it's now off the mizbeach. Once it's off the mizbeach, you can't apply the blood. So sharp sulim hechi zorik luhu midama, and that same question applies to the zrika blood of any animal, right? If you have a behema that has a psul in its blood, right? The blood goes up on the mizbeach. The din is that once it goes up, it can't come down. So you're supposed to throw it on the mizbeach. So now, if you're supposed to apply it, if the airspace of the mizbeach is not the mizbeach, how are you supposed to apply it? How are you going to do that? Because you have to throw it from a little bit of a distance. That's go through the air. That's sort of answers Josh's question, because the guy's not holding it at that point, meaning the issue here is that he's actually tossing it. It's got to leave the person and go through the air. Okay, so the answer is no, that doesn't necessarily prove anything. How are you going to do it? Demagalahu. What he has to do is it could be that it's only valid if he's touching the mizbeach, meaning that the blood never leaves the person who's holding the item on the mizbeach. So
Isharis is in contact with.
That's correct.
Mizbeach.
Problem with that is hazahi mitzohi. That's not what hazah is. Hazah was throwing the blood and has to go through the air. Squeezing it against the mizbeach, we called that something different. We called that mitzui. Right? Hazrika, that's not zrika. We said zrika, you're supposed to throw the blood. This is shvicha. This is pouring it where the utensil touches the corner and you spill it. That's not the same action. Ve'od, and furthermore, derech hazah bekach, that wouldn't even be. Is that the right way for hazah to be done? Derech zrika bekach, is that how zrika is supposed to be done? It's not. It's not right. So therefore, it's impossible. So therefore, if we're going to have a solution, right, where we're going to say that if the blood, right, with that became puzzle on top of this beach, if we're going to learn that you're supposed to apply it, that blood anyway, and you're going to apply that blood through hazah, through that sort of indicates that it has to be that the airspace is considered like the mizbeach. Okay, so therefore, we've proved that the airspace of the mizbeach is considered like the mizbeach. Therefore, you could do hazah, or you could do sprinkling, or throwing it from a little bit of distance, and that's not nechshav kilu yard mizbeach. It's not like it went off the mizbeach. Okay, the Gemara says not true. Amar Rav Ashi, ida nokit luhu barosh mizbeach hachanami. So okay, if the issue was a person, right? If that was your issue, this is where Josh's point comes out, right? So then we would be able to resolve the answer that the airspace, if a person is holding the blood, right, in the airspace, then we could prove that yes, right, the airspace of the mizbeach is like the mizbeach because there's a person who's holding it. That wasn't ever our question. That for sure, person holding it is on the mizbeach. That's considered, that airspace is considered to be on the mizbeach. That's true. Kikamar de talanu bekanya. The question we have is, there's a guy standing on the ground, and he's got his long pole, and on the end of the pole, he's got the blood that's hanging in this utensil. Okay? That's where the question is, where the person isn't on the mizbeach. Is that airspace going to be on the mizbeach or not? And there we say teku, we don't have a solution to that. So you're right, we have a circumstance where the airspace does catch. And we've been arguing back and forth all of these circumstances that we said, can you bring it up the ramp, drag it on the ramp? All of those are simply answered, right? Where a person is standing and pick it up, you're right, that's the airspace in the mizbeach, and that is going to still be the airspace in the mizbeach. It's where we're talking about when we're talking about hanging it over with a like hanging off with it in a helicopter, right? Where you're dangling over the mizbeach in a helicopter. That's where the question is, right? That's where that is going to be, whether that's going to be mekadesh or not, and that we're going to leave as teku. So don't do it, right? Always with a teku we go stringently.
Or can you even fly over Harabai?
So the kedusha, right? It's big problems, right? The kedusha is ola l'shamayim, right? So if the kedusha goes up to Shemayim, then it can be problematic flying over, doing a flyover.
Is the kedusha of the mizbeach ola l'shamayim? We're not saying that now. We're saying
no.
teku.
But remember, the kedusha, there's two different things, right? There's kedusha of azara, there's kedusha of mizbeach, which is mekadesh, the things that are on it. That's a din in the mizbeach. The mizbeach, contact with the mizbeach is what gives this, right? Which is different than airspace. Location and airspace is different.
You mean a location, the kedusha of the ground of Harabai
has kedusha,
okay,
right? So that's different than the mizbeach itself having the ability to
make something
kodesh that shouldn't be.
Okay,
right? Like a utensil can. Says the next Mishnah, kli halach mekadshin es halach. If you've got a container that's designed to hold liquid items, so then it can be mekadesh liquid items. And I took out my chumash this morning when I was reading this through, and right, we've got all these kinds of different containers in the Beis Hamikdash, right? We've got containers. Rashi gives us, sorry, not Rashi, but in the Masifta, it gives us a list of all the different types of containers. There's a hin container, a half a hin container, a quarter hin container, then there's a lug container, then there's a half a lug, a quarter lug. We have all of these, because all of the different korbanos need in different amounts. They had measuring cups for each of the different, right? So this is the half hin cup. This is the third of a hin cup. They had a quarter hin cup. They had, which is equal to 3 lugs. They had, so all of these different types of measuring utensils. Some of them, and they describe it, I don't know if this is exactly how they look, but the article draws it, so it must be correct, right? So these look like they are for liquid measures, like these cups, these look like for their liquids, and these bowls, containers, are for the solids. So liquid cups are able to be mekadesh roy. What's roy for it? They are mekadesh liquid, right? And the dry measure cups are mekadesh, the dry measure goods, right? So oil has to get put into a liquid cup in order for it to become holy, and the bowls are for flour. That's gonna be mekadesh that. Midos yavesh, the dry measures. So mikachos yavesh, they're going to consecrate the dry measure goods. Ein kli alach mekadesh yavesh v'lo yavesh mekadesh alach. The other way around does not work. You can't take the flour bowl and put oil in it and have it become kodesh. It doesn't work. Kliya kodesh shenikvu. Now let's say you have a holy utensil and it gets a hole in it. So im osin bahen me'ein malachton. Shahayu osan vehein shlemim, right? If the utensil, still that hole doesn't prevent it from being usable for whatever it was being used for before. Obviously, if you've got a liquid measure, you get a little hole in it, then that's going to be a problem, right? Now everything's going to leak out. You can't use it anymore. But if you've got some other utensil and it's designed to hold something that is larger and the little hole doesn't matter, so then mekadeshin, they stay as utensils. They're still functioning utensils, and therefore they can be mekadesh the whatever goes into it. The imlav, but if not, ein mekadshin, then they're not going to be able to work because they're not usable as utensil anymore. The chulon, and all of them ein mekadshin ela bakodesh. All of these utensils are only have any impact inside of the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, try to get to the. You want to stop here or? Let's stop here. Okay, it's late night.
That was solid. Yeah,
Okay.
close one out.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
Bye, everyone.